Well, I'm glad those technical difficulties are over.
Hello. I can't not laugh at the chickens.
I love the chickens. The chickens and the XR200 go perfectly paired.
It's funny because the chickens actually reside at the EREG headquarters.
Those are the originals.
Yep. Yep.
I lost one though. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll get into that another time.
Yes.
So yeah, it's nice to see you, Dallas. It's been a while.
It is nice to see you. Yes, it has. We haven't had a live in I don't know, months probably.
I know, it's been too long. The people have been requesting this, so.
That's good. Yeah. You have been on the road and busy.
Yeah, it's been lit lately.
Yeah, but you've had one heck of an adventure.
Yeah, and it's about to turn into another adventure because I'm going on the road in like 3 days.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Southeastern the USA, right?
Yeah.
Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I see people are jumping in the comments, which means people are watching. So for those of you who are hopping in on this, Dallas and I are going to have a conversation about learning to ride, and specifically kind of our opinions on whether you should start out on dirt or start out on the street. I know you guys all have lots of opinions on that because I saw it in the comments earlier. So I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, I saw a lot of comments on Facebook as well. When we posted it yesterday, a lot of people were, screaming dirt, of course. But I'm not sure that most people start on dirt. I think most people learn to ride a motorcycle on the street.
Maybe. I mean, my opinion is going to be, should be taken with a grain of salt because for me, I've never even had a street license. Don't hurt me. I've only ever ridden dirt, so I do have an opinion on the topic as an instructor for sure. But I've also never really ridden on the street other than at the ISDE and the odd time where I've ridden on the street for whatever reason. But yeah.
Accidentally. You were lost, obviously.
Yes, I was lost.
Yeah, I would, and we don't know the stats, but I would suspect that the majority of motorcycle riders that are out there in North America / the world probably learn to ride on the street, except the dirt people, which is us. We usually, the story is, especially re-entry riders that I know, they rode dirt bikes as a kid and then they left that for a while and then they came back and they re-entered dirt.
Right. Yes, that sounds very familiar. I hear a lot of people kind of giving me that same story at my clinics, actually.
Right. It's the classic. We call them re-entry riders.
Okay.
We see them all the time. They're 40-ish, 35-ish, because usually what happens, of course, you ride as a kid, and then there's a variety of things that happen when you're 20. The number one thing is you leave your parents' house. So you get off the teat, so to speak, the financial teat of like having your family take care of you, where you can actually afford that. And then as soon as you're on your own, your 20s, man, oh man, you can't afford that.
Right. Yes.
And then, you get rid of your motorcycle until you establish some sort of training that allows you to earn money. And then when you can earn money, usually you meet a spouse and that ties you up in all kinds of knots for X amount of years. And then there's children. And then we see these people come back in like 35 when they can afford it and they actually have time.
Yeah, it's exactly the story I hear from so many people at my clinics. They're usually in their 40s or even 50s, And they say that. I just started 5 years ago. Haven't been on a bike since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, oh, why'd you take so much time off of riding? And they say that, life happened. And so it makes
Right.
me realize that not everyone in this world bases their life around riding their dirt bike. Although I've done
Right.
everything in my power to be able to focus on riding, but it's not feasible for a lot of people.
No, I think that your perspective about motorcycles is way different than most people's. But it's good. Like, I mean, it's good to have your perspective, and then, you know, you meet those people in the clinics and be like, oh yeah, right. You haven't ridden your entire life.
Yeah.
Right. So, during that process, I feel like when they re-enter the atmosphere of dirt, which is awesome, they have to consider if they're actually going to ride a dirt bike. And I think that's a really difficult decision for most people to make as an adult. Like, if you're not into riding dirt bikes and you're 36 and then you have to announce to your family and friends that you're about to get a dirt bike, like, that's a difficult conversation.
I don't see why.
Well, here's what I faced, and you know my situation very well, but I rode as a kid, and I thought, do I want to ride a street bike or do I want to ride a dirt bike? And I just said, F it, I want to ride a dirt bike, because that's where I had that kernel of joy was all derived from dirt. So I thought, I'm an adult. This is going to seem really immature for me to make this choice, because I was basically just a civilian at 32 when I re-entered. And all of my family, immediately, the visions that flashed through their mind was me flying through the air on a freestyle motocross ramp.
Yeah, of course. Classic.
and not making the landing.
Yeah.
And that would be it. I'd be, quadriplegic, and like, that's it. My life's over, as well as their lives with me. It's just like, so that they imagined the worst thing that they could possibly think about. And then, of course, I had to fight against that perspective or perception. And so that was that's what I think most people who are re-entering have to face.
Right.
And it's a lot easier to be like, hey, I'm thinking about getting a cruiser or like, a street motorcycle so I can commute to work and save gas for the family.
Right. That's what it is. It's a useful thing for everyday life. It's not some immature hobby or like crazy midlife crisis thing. It's just a normal thing to ride a motorcycle on the road.
Yeah, it's a lot more socially acceptable to do that than and our problem, both you especially, but me also, is that we've been down this rabbit hole of dirt bikes for so long and so intensely that it's hard for us to realize what civilians go through.
Right. Well, and what civilians think of dirt biking as, like I think a lot of people might think it's easier and safer to ride on the street because, like you said, they think dirt biking is flying off a freestyle ramp or, hitting a triple on the motocross track. Not saying what we do isn't dangerous, but at the same time, I think that riding on the dirt is, to an extent, uh, I'm excluding pro freestyle riders and stuff like that, but I think it's safer to ride enduro than it is to swing a leg over a bike out on the street, especially if you're learning.
Oh, I completely agree. You and I have talked about this a lot. So I completely agree. Knowing what we know, we will 100% agree with that statement. But I also agree that the public perception, civilian perception, families, noobs, they completely disagree. They think it's flying through the air. They think street bikes are safer than dirt bikes. But I don't know. I agree with you. I think they're 100% incorrect. they're wrong.
Yeah,
Now,
that's what.
we both agree, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, I'm biased. I love dirt biking and I'm a dirt bike instructor. Um, but I think having just you, the bike, and the trail is a lot easier for you to learn than being surrounded in other vehicles coming from different directions, lights, um, all sorts of stuff going on where, if you crash, you look like a real dummy because nobody wants to be laid out on the street on their motorcycle. But also, you're probably going to get really hurt because the speeds are high. You have 5,000-pound vehicles coming at you.
Yeah. And I think like when you have this discussion, or we have this discussion in the context of what we've seen, because if you're tuning in and you don't know, we've been teaching off-road riding for a long time. And we've seen a lot in that time, like thousands of riders. And we've seen all these crashes and we've experienced all these crashes ourselves. So it's like our eyes have been open to like the possibilities of all these different crashes and the types of crashes people have. Like whiskey throttle,
Yeah.
like that doesn't just happen on dirt bikes.
Right.
I don't know if you've watched YouTube at all, but like you watch any type of street crash compilation thing, and it's like a lot of that stuff's whiskey throttle on a 600cc, 110 horsepower motorcycle right into a parked car in a parking lot. Just wham. It's crazy.
Right. And that stems from not having the natural instinct to pull in the clutch or do what you need to do. And I, even in the street riding clinics, I've never personally taken one, but I've been told by half a dozen people that if you cover your clutch and your brake, you fail
Yeah.
instantly. Whereas for
Yeah.
us, we are always covering our controls so that in a split second we can react if we need to.
Yeah, I have heard the same thing, and I don't know if it's true. I mean, maybe somebody can chime in and tell us if it's true or not. But like I heard the same thing. If you have a finger on the clutch or a finger on the brake, you fail. Like you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why they wouldn't encourage that on the street, because it improves your reaction times for braking and clutch.
I
I don't
mean,
know.
from what I've been told, their reasoning is they want you holding on with all your strength. And they teach you to use 3 fingers on your levers. Yeah. I don't want to like crap all over what they teach or anything like that. But to
No.
me, it seems mind boggling that you wouldn't want people to, from the very start, know how to be prepared.
Yeah, I don't. I definitely don't want to crap on what they teach. I just don't understand, and I
Right.
would like to understand. I wish I understood, because if there was a reason behind that philosophy, I'm wrong. Like I have no idea. But I just don't understand, because we teach that off road. Like you need to reduce your reaction time. So you need to be able to cut the power immediately, and you need to be able to brake immediately.
Yeah.
But having that delay and like reaching for your lever and then pulling it in, like, man, why? If you can just learn to ride with a finger on the lever.
Yeah. I'm waiting for someone to come in the comments with a realistic explanation. But
Yeah, yeah.
what I have seen in the comments, and it's a little bit off topic, but someone named Trent and someone named BH was also talking about dirt bikes aren't really readily available or accessible for a lot of people. Like
Mhm.
you gotta load up. So you need a truck. You need to have access to a riding area. And so I think it's a lot, from what these guys just said in the comments, it's a lot easier for some people who want to ride a motorcycle to learn on the street.
Mhm. I agree. I saw another comment about city versus country, and I agree. If you grew up in the city, you're not riding dirt bikes as a kid. It's not happening.
Hmm.
Um, But so I agree. What I would say is, very slowly, it seems that there are more and more dirt bike training facilities opening in North America. And there's not a ton of them. It's not nearly like street training,
Right.
but they are opening. They are available if you root around and look for them. And I think it would be worthwhile to attend an off-road riding clinic, or I don't know, something where you can just get your feet wet in the dirt before you add all those other variables of riding on the street.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So I guess the other comment, and I'll ask your opinion on this. I have seen lots of new riders in the dirt, and I can read body language really well, and I know what's going through their heads, usually chaos, as they're like doing stuff. And so that means to me that like they're not comfortable actually just riding the bike. Like they're struggling mentally, they're thinking about things, they're thinking what they need to do.
Right.
And I can't imagine someone that I love or care about knowing that they were in that mental situation of like still thinking about how to control the motorcycle, and then being like, hey, you know what? I'm going to add 1,000 other variables at the same time: stoplights, street lights, yields, on ramps, off ramps, and a whole bunch of variables that you can control. So all these crazy people in cars turning and not seeing like, and subjecting them to that, because I feel like it's like, man, a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that's what gets me. I see it at stoplights. I can tell same thing by people's body position. When they come to a stop, they're a little shaky and they both feet come out off the pegs and then they put them down and stop. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, good for this person. They're learning to ride. That's neat. But it's also like, holy crap. Like, there's no way. When I first learned to ride my dirt bike, it was scary without any of those variables you mentioned. It was scary in a dirt lot, just not stalling. And so I mean, people do it and they don't die. But it seems pretty risky, especially for the people who are um, on bikes that are too big. I think a lot of people, when they first start, they don't want to buy a learner bike. They want to buy their dream bike. So they'll go and they'll buy like an R6 or an R1, like something that's just way too much. And it's like a whiskey throttle on that baby is going to end in carnage.
Mm. So when I turned 16, I got a crotch rocket. So I was like, imagine a 16-year-old, and imagine me knowing what you know about me on a crotch rocket at 16. Like, what a mistake!
I'm having anxiety.
I'm having anxiety just thinking about what went on. But it was so terrifyingly fast, and I had ridden dirt bikes quite a bit in my youth, but it was so terrifyingly fast. And the other thing was, the only way that I could get a thrill on that bike was to go really fast. So my rule used to be, I just double all the speed limits. I know that sounds insane, but I just double, on these curvy, twisty roads, it's like, oh, 60. It's like, oh, well, I just double that. I'm like, oh, I'm okay at 120. And that would be my rule. And it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. Like, I didn't crash. I'm not dead, but I should be. But I should be. So imagine giving someone that's not ridden a motorcycle a lot, or they go to their MSF course, their 2-day motorcycle class. So they get there on Saturday morning, like, woo, we're going to do some theory. And then Sunday, they're like handed their graduation certificate and their license and being like, good luck on that, 600cc sport bike.
Yep.
Or more. So yeah, it's terrifying. And that's all they have to do. They just have to qualify by going to a 2-day class. Nuts.
Right. Yeah. Oh.
Joe, I noticed a comment that Anthony put up. If you don't know who Anthony is the man in the sky who just magically makes everything happen for Megs and I. Joe Lee, who's in the comments, said something. He was playing devil's advocate. He said if you drive a car for a long time on the street, it eliminates all those variables. Like, you know how to drive a car, and you know about stoplights and field. So you learn all that stuff. And then you learn to ride a motorcycle on sticky pavement or tarmac. And it's easier to ride than taking someone who knows how to ride a car or in the street bike and then throw them into the woods with us. And it's like, whoa, it's totally different. It's way harder.
Right. I mean, I think that's a fair point. I'm not going to shoot that one down. But I think there's I'm trying to word it without being a turd. I think he's right there. I think if you have been driving, you've had your license for ages, and you know how to drive, and you know what it's like. It's going to help. But I will say, when I was on the road on my bike at the ISDE, it was still a very different vibe. I felt very vulnerable, and I don't know. I was a little bit. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just in a car doing what I do. It was definitely different.
Yeah, for sure. And I also feel like you. Like, I'm not going to strongly disagree with I think it was Joe. But what I would say, and this is just a generic comment, the consequences of making a mistake on the road and the consequences of making a mistake in the dirt are dramatically different.
Right.
Like, you could die on the street. And sure, you could argue you could die in the dirt. But, like, here's a reasonable statistic that Chuck Harder told me earlier today. He said that if you're an expert enduro rider, your average speed is 35 kilometers an hour. And I don't know what that is in miles. So Americans, I don't know. Megs, you might know. What's 35 kilometers an hour in
maybe 20 miles an hour?
Yeah, it's obviously less. But and that's their average. So sure, sometimes they go faster than that, but sometimes they also go slower than that. But 35 kilometers an hour, it's usually not going to kill you.
Yeah.
But on the street, like, a low speed would be 50 and a high speed would be, 150, depending on how crazy you want to get. Or, I mean, shit, they can go a lot faster than that.
Yeah.
There's no surviving a 235 kilometer an hour street crash.
Yeah. Can I tell a story about a crash on the Coquihalla?
Please. Were you involved or no?
No. But it's an accident that happened on a highway near where we're from. And yeah, it's kind of graphic, but I'm not going to be super graphic about it. But basically, some guy was doing like over 200 kilometers an hour on a street bike. And for whatever reason, I don't know what happened, but he ran into the back of a semi-truck. So
yikes.
For people in the US that don't know what semi-trucks are, an 18-wheeler. So anyways, he ran into the back of it. And when the ambulance came, he was running in circles, like off his bike. He was running. And when they got his helmet off, his head split in half and he died. I just thought, like, I'm not trying to say street biking is bad and it's too fast, but I just, like, those are the speeds that some people go.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I mean, people die on the street. We live on a twisty road up to EREG HQ where we are, and you know the road very well. And I don't know, like 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago there was 2 motorcycle crashes on the road. One was a cruiser, and the gentleman was, riding back to Kamloops in a beautiful sunset. He entered the corner too fast on his cruiser. He locked up the rear brake, which stood the bike up right away, and he went right off the road, and he hit a telephone pole and died on the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's like, oh man, like I felt it's just 1 minute you're there and the next minute you're dead
Yeah.
riding your motorcycle. And the second crash was just the other way going into the community, into the town. And they went right off the corner. They blew the corner because that's what always seems to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then went right off and ended up in a pasture. Now, he was fine. He was with all his buddies, and the tractor dragged the bike back up the hill and blah, blah, blah. But it was like, he's lucky to be walking away from those.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that the consequences of street mistakes are not necessarily because there's two types of crashes on the street. There's crashes that are not your fault. So soccer mom turns left in front of you and you have no whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the one that you're not in control of. And then there's the mistakes where you entered the corner too fast, or you're responsible for the crash.
Right.
But I feel in dirt, we're to blame most of the time.
Right. I want to backtrack real quick to that first one where you said it's the one that's not your fault, where someone can just turn into you.
Yeah.
So if someone's learning on the street, yes, they're aware that people can turn into them and this and that, but sometimes you can still get taken by surprise. But if motorcycling isn't natural to you, you're most definitely not going to save that situation. So you're not going to go into a stoppie and quickly avoid them or throttle out to just squeak by. You're probably just going to panic and get hit by the car.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you 100%. Like, the beauty, and you know this because you're around all the time, we celebrate failure here. And failure, failing will allow you to succeed. So the problem, or that I see it, you don't get to fail a lot on a street motorcycle. So you're right, you don't get to learn like, oh yeah, this happened. Oh, I always just do this and everything's okay.
Right.
But we learn that through failure on the dirt bikes, but on the street, man, like usually it's just like you're riding along for years and years and years and years, everything's fine, and then just 1 minute, bang, lady turns left in front of you and just yuck.
Right. Yeah.
And you're right. What do you do? Like you're not used to emergency situations. Are you ever in an emergency situation when you're riding your dirt bike?
Oh yeah, constantly. I am. I'm not joking. I am.
That's the right answer. I know. That's why I asked.
I am on the brink of not being able to slow down quickly enough with every single corner. Like when I'm pushing to
Right.
go as fast as I can, because that's what we do. Yeah, you're on the brink of disaster the whole time. I don't mean you're hanging way outside of your comfort zone, but I mean within your comfort zone, you're pushing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you wouldn't want to do that. I mean, some people do it on the street. There are people out there that live for that, but for the most part, it's not safe for you or other people on the road if you're riding like that on the street. It's a public area,
So I've heard those people referred to as organ donors on the street that are on the edge of their comfort zone all the time.
Yeah.
So what's happening in the background is Chuck Carter is texting me, and he's listening to us talk about the consequences of street riding, and he wants to chime Chuck in for a bit.
Okay.
He's got something to say. I don't know what. Oh, here he is. Working. Are you at the shop working?
Yeah. Yeah.
Half a face.
You have a gloves on.
There we go. So tell us the story about the consequences of street versus dirt, like in relation to how a mechanic sees it.
Well, I feel like most of the conversations we have, like, it's a lot more two-sided than this. There's usually like another like a valid point from the other side, but on this one, like, it seems to be coming up like pretty obvious from every perspective, and I'm not going to like remedy that situation at all. But like from a mechanic's perspective, sometimes you need to go searching for used parts, and both for dirt bikes and for street bikes. And when I'm working on dirt bikes, like I'm always rebuilding engines and stuff. But like if you need chassis parts for especially an older dirt bike, there's a decent chance that you can find chassis parts. It's usually the engines that fail first. Very, very much the opposite with street bikes. The wrecking yards are full of bikes that have been crashed with good engines. With street bikes, it's easy to find. It's relatively easy to find a spare engine if you want, but finding chassis parts is almost impossible, because the way a street bike dies is in a crash, and then they end up in a wrecking yard. The engine is fine, and the chassis is totaled.
Yikes!
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's a scary thought. Scary.
Well, and being in the bike industry, I see crashed motorcycles on a perhaps more regular basis than your average individual, and it's usually not pretty.
Right. Cool, man. Well, I know you wanted to tell that story, and so just so everyone understands what's happening right now is Chuck does prostate exams off bike mechanic hours. So I know you got to get back to the old exams. There's probably a lineup outside the door, is there?
This is not appropriate for my channel.
I had to lock the door.
We're not on your channel. This is the truth. Look at those gloves. It's tough to make it as just strictly a motorcycle mechanic these days.
He's not
These gloves
denying
can be used for a wide variety of activities.
Oh,
Megs,
before
go ahead.
Before we send Chuck away, let's address Paul's comment in there. It says, strange that street bike engines last much longer than dirt bike ones. Let's explain why, because we know, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's fair. Like street bike engines aren't generally in as much like as high a state of tune as dirt bike engines. So like that's definitely a fair comment. But the fact still remains, like, even if you parse out only street bikes, and if you were to compare cruisers with crotch rockets, it's easier. Like crotch rockets, the engines tend to fail sooner, and it's harder to get crotch rocket parts than cruiser parts. But even still, like it's way biased to one side. I mean, generally, how street bikes die is by being crashed.
But we're harder on, for the most part, we're harder on our engines as dirt riders.
Oh yeah,
punny. That's very punny.
And I mean, I think you were kind of getting at they're a little more high performance in ways, right? And like some of your street bike engines that last forever, and correct me if I'm wrong, I could be totally wrong, but some of those engines that last forever aren't like as tight and like high compression, and like some of our bikes run a little bit hotter, and we put them through more, don't we?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like a dirt bike engine is designed, an enduro dirt bike engine is designed to last like, not even 200 hours. Depending on the application, but if you get 200 hours out of your dirt bike engine, you're doing just fine. Obviously not the case with a street bike.
Your top end, you mean?
Yeah. Bottom ends tend to go, in an enduro application, 400 or more. If for an intermediate rider. That's an interesting comment. the like road racers, especially Randy Courtney Bennett is saying, talking about road racing, and yeah, road race engines. So like when you subject street bike engines or street engines to the kind of stress that we put on our dirt bikes, they often last a similar amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
But like I say, my point is just, from my perspective, when I'm sourcing used parts for street bikes, it's usually easy to find engine parts or full engines, but it's very difficult usually to find chassis parts for street bikes.
Nice.
Scary.
Yep.
Cool, man. Well, thank you for the comment. I appreciate the your perspective, because I didn't know that. I never thought about how street bikes die versus how dirt bikes die, because we're so used to that.
Yeah, it's just what I thought about when I was, when I thought about this topic, because I run into it on a regular basis.
Cool. Another pun. Run into it.
Stop mentioning the puns.
I don't know. I'm hanging out with Redneck en route all the time, and he's a pun guy. Terrible form of humor. Anyway, Chuck, we'll let you get back to the prostate exams. Oh, and Megs, I want to talk about prostates after Chuck leaves.
We're not talking about
I'm serious. That. No, we should. Okay. Anyway, Chuck, thank you so much. We appreciate your input.
Thanks, Chuck.
Yeah. I could hear them screaming. They saw his hands and they're screaming.
Man.
No, the only reason I want to mention, I'm not joking about prostate. Men's health issues. Men that get older, they should get their prostate checked at 50. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Lots of men die of embarrassment.
Okay.
No, I'm being sincere. If there's any older men watching this, they'll understand.
All right. Well, that's very kind of you. Yeah.
I'm just segueing into that prostate is an appropriate topic for your channel.
Okay. I'm not going to deny it.
Take care of your aging spouse.
Okay. So I had a thought. And I kind of wanted to talk about the benefits of learning on dirt, other than the fact that there's a lot less going on traffic wise, like learning how to react to different terrain, like less traction, right? Loose gravel, slippery, wet terrain, because on the pavement, it's always super grippy until you come into that one corner with some gravel. And as a dirt rider, I would know how to react. I would see it and I would do what I needed to do. But maybe as someone who learned on the street and who only has experience on the street, they may see it and not change anything, and that could lead to a wreck. So I think riding in the dirt really helps you learn how to maintain traction in slippery situations and how to recognize situations that might need, I got to change it up, or I got to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the comment that just came out, thank you, Anthony. Wade Holler, he just said the same thing. He just basically said, traction management on dirt bikes is constant. And on street, like you said, Megs, it's like, everything's fine until it's not, and it happens so quick. Yeah. And then back to your earlier point, it's like when something happens on the street bike, you just don't know what to do because you don't face it all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, awesome point.
Cool. Do we have any arguments for learning on the street?
I would say put it out to people making comments right now. I'm stretched to find an argument for learning on the street besides convenience, which I think is a valid point.
So convenience, and then what about learning without having obstacles? So the fact that all you have to worry about terrain wise is smooth, grippy pavement. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess that's an easy way to learn your controls and how to actually ride the motorcycle.
Hmm. I think that learning on street eliminates traction variables.
Which
So
is
that's
good and bad.
right. It's good in the sense that you're right. Your mental focus and energy can go on to controls, throttle control, clutch control, riding the motorcycle, learning how to corner, keeping your head on a swivel and like looking for traffic and all the other things you got to deal with when you're on the street. So I think there are some arguments to be made, but I would say that only works in a controlled environment. So like in a great big parking lot where it's pavement, and I think that's good. But adding all the other variables while you're learning to ride a street bike, man, oh man, that's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about one parallel topic. It's related for sure. There's a tremendous amount of people going into adventure riding right now. And we had the fortune to participate in an event in BC called the Adventure Bike Gathering 2 weeks ago. And that event's going to grow. I think there's 300 adventure riders showing up for that event, and they're all on 650 to 1000 or 1200 cc machines.
Yeah.
And we met people from two different backgrounds. One, people that were coming from the street, so they used to ride a Harley, or they used to ride some form of cruiser, or something, and they're coming over from that. Or people who just are being introduced to motorcycles for the first time. They're like, man, this adventure thing looks really cool, so I'm going to buy an adventure bike and go riding. So it's like a whole different can of worms for them, because they're street bikers moving over to not really off-road, but like they're dealing with traction issues in a big way on a big bike. And I don't know, it was a really interesting group.
Yeah, that sort of thing is really intimidating for me, even as a fairly experienced dirt rider. I wouldn't want to be dealing with the stuff I deal with on my bike on such a heavy machine. I mean, I'm small and the stuff I'm riding is ridiculous, but I still I look at adventure bikes and I'm like, that's an interesting way to get into dirt riding, taking a big heavy motorcycle onto the dirt and learning about traction.
Yeah, in our world, in the enduro or trail bike off-road world, we argue constantly, two-stroke or four-stroke, two-stroke or four-stroke. And the knock on four-strokes, of course, is like, oh, they're so heavy and they're hard to turn. And, the four-stroke engine makes a lot of gyroscopic force and blah, blah, blah. So in our world, we argue about 20 pounds. Like, that's a huge difference in weight, like 20 pounds.
Yeah.
But when you're moving into adventure bikes, you're getting up at like 350 plus.
Yeah.
And we know how hard it is to ride a bike that weighs 20 or 30 pounds heavier. So think about how hard it is to ride a bike that's 400 plus, and learning to ride that bike off-road for the first time.
And knowing that when it goes down, it's going to be a big ordeal. Like some of those bikes, you got to use, like, I know some adventure riders carry like little mini winches and stuff in their packs, because if that thing ends up down on a downhill or something and you're by yourself, there's no way. So I guess for me, I would ride timidly. If I was trying to take a larger bike into the gnarlier terrain, I would be, in the back of my mind, I'd be like, well, crashing isn't an option. I do not want to drop this bike because I can't pick it up again, and because it's going to cost $1,500 in BMW shrouds.
Yeah, no, I don't want to knock the adventure thing because I'm a big proponent. I'm really happy.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just scary as a learning rider.
Yes, yes. I guess what we're talking about is just the consequences. Like, you know,
Yeah,
dirt bike consequences, small, light dirt bike consequences are smaller.
yeah,
And then as you add weight, the consequences just keep getting larger. And then that's not even adding street variables with other cars and guardrails and telephone poles. That's
right.
just keeping them off road, but just adding a whole bunch of weight. And I just saw a comment from someone and they said 350 pounds. What are you talking about? Like try 650, 700 pounds of off road adventure motorcycle. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's a very daunting situation to be riding a motorcycle that big off road. Um,
As, especially if you're learning.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, and everyone has to learn too. So like, I mean, we have to acknowledge that like people need to
Yeah.
learn, and maybe the majority of people that learn just learn slowly and they don't have a lot of consequences and they make it okay and like, whoo, they made it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know. We're
Well,
just here talking.
and I'm looking through it or looking at it through my Megs Brap goggles, and I'm picturing like, oh, like we're going to be riding rock faces on adventure bikes. And to me,
Right.
that's like super scary. But I think a lot of adventure and dual sport riders aren't taking their 500-pound motorcycles into that stuff at the beginning, at least.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
agree.
there's very many hard enduro riders on adventure bikes other than like Chris Birch and a few
Right.
pretty badass riders.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, someone just made a great point about adventure bikes being so versatile. So it's like you can leave from your garage at your house, you can run the highway, you can go to get a coffee, you can be in
Yeah.
the mountains, and then you can ride back. So I get it. I guess you're right. We're both looking at through the lens of like enduro riders, and then seeing so many newish riders through all these clinics
Yeah.
and having fear, like fear for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Concern, not fear, concern.
Right. I I think if I was gonna ride on the street, I would get a dual sport or an adventure. Probably a dual sport. I wouldn't go as far as having an adventure bike, but I would definitely get on that train.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I want to have an adventure bike in the future because I think there are, I do enjoy the idea of traveling on a motorcycle and sticking to the back roads and staying out of traffic as much as possible.
Hmm.
But definitely being more comfortable as I put more mileage on and not beat the body up so much. So, I mean, that's another reason why a lot of dirt riders are transitioning to adventure as they get older, just
Hmm.
because you don't need to beat your body to rat shit every time you go out on an adventure bike.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Anyway, one last comment. I know you got to go. We're coming up on our hour. Gwyn Fitzsimmons, who is in the comments, who we both know, she just mentioned like it's crazy to think that a GS 650 BMW is considered a novice learner's bike in the adventure world.
Right.
That's
That,
like wow.
it's a lot of bike.
Yeah, I can't even. You've been on BMWs. I remember that day you rode that 1200 up here in the field. Do you remember that day?
Yeah. So there are two times I've ridden a GS 1200.
Right.
And the first time I was on a big logging road and they were like, "Oh, just try it, just try it." So I got on it, and remember, I'm very small.
Mm-hmm.
So I got on it and right away it just it just tipped over, but it had those really big guards around it with like like metal tubing, so it didn't fall very far.
Right, right,
It
right,
was just like, "Oh, just pick it back up." But then I
right.
finally got going and the thing wanted to do 60 miles an hour in first gear. And I was
Yeah,
like, this is
for
like,
sure.
this is crazy. And I'm on like a 20-foot wide logging road. And I was like intimidated by it. So props to adventure riders that are out there riding single track.
Oh,
It's
yeah, yeah,
gnarly. I mean, as a small rider, it's extra intimidating because the bike's physically way too big for me. But it's pretty cool.
It's just all the weight and all the momentum, and we understand intimately what weight and momentum do to your riding, especially when you're off road on low traction. And it
Yeah.
just, all those things just give you the shivers.
Yep.
Cool, man. Well, awesome.
Yeah, that was a good one. I like that.
Me too. I like talking about this. We've been talking about this for a while, and
Yeah.
I think it evolved because of what we've been seeing, um, and a lot of people that I've been seeing lately are coming from the street,
Yeah.
and they're trying dirt for the first time. And when I see them wobbling around like a little duckling in the field, it gives me great concern for their safety.
Right.
And it makes me nervous to think about them on the street.
Yeah.
So you're off to where? South Carolina first?
I'm going to Georgia first. So I'll be putting on a level 1 clinic and a level 2. I've got some really awesome stuff planned for the groups. So that one's going to be awesome. It's at Rock Crusher Farm. So some people watching might know where that is. They host races.
Right.
So excited about that. And then after that, I'm going to South Carolina. We got a beautiful piece of private land. So the students in South Carolina are in for a treat as well. And then it's North Carolina, and that one is at a classic riding area. It's called Brushy Mountain, and it's going to be sweet. Same thing, level 1 and level 2. So I'm really looking forward to this tour.
Awesome. So that's the month of October. You'll be out and about.
Yeah. Yeah. I leave on Monday, and I'm going to be coming back at the end of October.
Cool. I see you got a spiffy new truck too.
Yeah, it finally happened. I'm excited to have some reliability on the road.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, I wish you luck in the Southeast USA tour. And yeah, we'll have to do this again. We'll have to, all those conversations we have about weird topics that have to do with dirt bikes, we'll have to do another live.
Yeah, we're each gonna do a poll on our Facebook page to see what people want next.
Yeah. 2 strokes versus 4 strokes. What oil should I run in my motorcycle?
When should I do my top end?
Right. What tires should I run?
All right.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you again.
Yep, thanks. It was awesome.
See ya.
Bye.